where about 1,000 enslaved African men were kept at a time. Now, before we start the tour, we would have a brief history of the transatlantic slave trade. In the 15th century, the Europeans became interested in Africa, and they were interested for various reasons, but most important reason was imperial purposes. The other reasons were to spread Christianity, to trade with the Africans, and for scientific enquiries. Now in Ghana, we had about 40 forts and castles. The castles were just 3, the remaining were forts. We have the Elmina Castle being the first, and it was built by the Portuguese in 1482. We have the Christiansborg Castle in Accra, built by the Danes in 16. We have Cape Coast Castle, built by the British in 1665. Now this land, Cape Coast, was originally called Fetu or Ugwa. It was inhabited by the local people called Fetu. The Portuguese were the first Europeans to get to this land. They called this land Cabo Corso, meaning short cape. The Portuguese left, the Swedes came, they built a fort called Fort Carolsberg. The fort was later occupied by the Danes, then the Dutch. And in 1664, during the Anglo-Dutch War, the British captured the fort from the castle, so it became Cape Coast Castle. The British corrupted Cabo Corso into Cape Coast. Right. There were 2 key people who voted for the idea that Africans could be taken as captives to work on the plantations. One of them was a priest called Bartholomew de las Casas, the other called Manuel de Nobrega. And that was when the transatlantic slave trade began. But Africa then, we had a different geopolitical setting. We did not have countries like Ghana, Nigeria. Instead, we had kingdoms, we had states, we had empires. And these conglomerations sometimes fought each other for expansion. So the prisoners of war were sold into slavery. Other times to debtors, people who owed other people were sold into slavery. Lastly, there were some Africans called slave raiders. They would attack towns and villages, set these settlements on fire, and as the inhabitants ran for their lives, they were captured and enslaved. Now, the captives that went through these dungeons were from various parts of West Africa, from the interior, from the south. Some were all the way from present-day Mali, from present-day Burkina Faso, northern Ghana from the south. And from wherever they were captured, they had to walk on barefoot towards the south, towards the castles and the forts. Before the captives were brought in here, they were taken to a town called Asen-Mansu for a ritual. Now, they were taken for a last bath in the slave river at Asen-Mansu. And from there, they were supposed to walk again on barefoot into the castle. And in here, they were taken to a room called the Palaba Hall, which we will visit soon. Over there, they were exchanged for goods, and afterwards, they were branded like cattle and sorted out according to their gender. So male captives were brought in here to the male slave dungeons. Female captives that way to the female slave dungeons to wait for their ships. One of us read this out loud for all of us.
Can I read?
Yes, please. You can read it.
Everlasting memory of the anguish of our ancestors. May those who died rest in peace. May those who return find their roots. May humanity never again perpetrate such injustice against humanity. We the living vow to uphold this.
Thank you. All right, so the message that she just read out was from our chiefs. In 1992, during the first ever Panafest. Now, Panafest is a festival. It's a celebration that calls for the unity of Africans all over the world. So the chiefs brought this message to apologize for their involvement in the slave trade. They also have a message for the rest. Was the graveyard or the cemetery for the British. but there was just one African man buried here. In 1996, there was an archaeological excavation in this area. Several burials were uncovered. However, only these 4 graves could be identified. Now, the African was segregated from the British. So this was the African. This man here was born Kweku. Kweku means a Wednesday-born male. Kweku's father was a slave merchant. His father was an African that sold fellow Africans to the British. So because of that, Kweku, when he was young, he had a scholarship to study in England. And over there, he was given the name Philip because he was baptized into the Anglican faith. And then Kweku was anglicized into Paku. So he became Philip Paku. And when he was 54, the first African to be ordained an Anglican priest, the following year he came back to the castle, and up there was the church, where he served for nearly 50 years. Philip died in 1816 when he was 75 years old. He was buried here. This was the church that was right above the male slave dungeon. Again, it was called Society for the Propagation of the Gospel, now the Anglican Church. But the church has been moved outside the castle. So this is a children's library. Children from schools around come here to read. Built 2 forts to protect this castle. These were built so that its inhabitants would always be on the lookout to see if there was any enemy ship approaching. They would inform those in the castle. We have Fort William, we have Fort Victoria. So let's go see Fort Victoria first. Hill, you can see from this side, or you can view from here. It's on a hill far away. Do you all see? There was a British governor. The governor was the highest form of authority that lived in the castle. There were British soldiers, there were other British occupants. This was the governor's quarters. This room was the governor's reception area, where he received and entertained his guests. His personal office over there and his cellar. So let's see Fort William, a white building on the hill. This one has a red roof. This is Fort William. Now, this was one of the forts built to protect the castle. At that time, there were no telephones. So in order for effective communication with the castle, in the mornings they waved flags. In the afternoons they used the reflection of a mirror and torchlights in the evening to warn the castle of an enemy ship. Yes, the British used to arm themselves. So cannons here, cannon balls behind us. And in order to put these in use, they first put gunpowder in the cannon, a cannonball at the mouth, and then they lit a match behind, exactly, to attack or to defend themselves from attack. The building in the middle, over there was the canteen. That was where they ate. Now, after the British vacated the castle after 1960, this canteen became a prison for the inhabitants of Cape Coast. And then in 1992, the prison was moved from here to a place called Anchor Fort. Now this serves as a coffee shop, and the garrisons are all art shops. And these floors that we stand on are original. These were made with marble stones, which were imported from Europe. This room here was the first Western judicial court in Ghana, and this was established by Captain George McLean, the man who saw down there. McLean introduced the local people to the Western judicial system after 1833, after slavery had been abolished. But before that, we Africans had our own indigenous forms of settling disputes. So for instance, in this area, when one had an issue or a dispute, he would take it to the chief's palace, the traditional ruler. The chief would then listen and decide a judgment. And at that time, the common punishment were being banished, being exiled for one full term. This is the Palama. This was where the buying and selling of captives is. Now we realize that in malls or shops, each item for sale has a price tag. We come to our traditional West African markets, it is different. So for instance, if I want to purchase a bag, I'm going to ask a vendor, how much is it? She tells me the price and then we haggle, we bargain before I buy it. That was exactly how the captives were sold in here. So what happened was that the middlemen were the Africans that brought the captives from the interior. So right from Asenmantu, where the captives had their last back, these middlemen would bring the captives in here. And over there would be British merchants waiting to buy the captives. The merchants first examined the captives for physical strength, and then they bought them with items such as guns, gunpowder, fabrics, tobacco, mirrors, tin, foods, other items. Then after purchasing the captives, the merchants branded them for identification, because not just one merchant was buying with various merchants, and they had to know which captive belonged to whom. So they had branded items, metals that were heated in fire. They were taken directly from the fire to the captive skin to show whether they belong to this group or the other. It was after the captives had been branded that they were taken